G'day, Matt Grace here from Flying Donkey. In this video, I just want to quickly touch on the Medibank hack scenario. I also want to come back and look at some of the other scenarios that have gone on in a longer video, but this one I just want to concentrate on the Medibank one. Now, in the news, we get a lot of sort of feedback around Medibank hacked, all the users, etc., but very little detail on what actually occurred. I got an article here that I found that sort of dives into some of the detail around what actually happened. This is only an excerpt and there's plenty of other articles out there, but I wanted to just quickly read through this and sort of get your thoughts and also some of my thoughts on what's sort of gone on. So according to various reports, and this is linked in the article, which I can go below, it started when a hacker compromised the credentials of a Medibank employee. Very important there, what they're essentially saying is that a hacker got the credentials of a Medibank employee. Now, it doesn't go into any details in this article, and I've read a number of other articles on this, but I can only guess that these credentials were taken by some sort of phishing attack. Now, phishing attack is generally where you receive those emails that ask you to go to another site and prompt and put you for an email and username and password. And that's the only way I can normally think that these credentials have been stolen. Other ways I can normally get username and passwords like this is generally the employees themselves have stored them in a free text and they've been lost. But to be honest, the most common way that credentials are stolen are through phishing attacks. So this is important. They've confirmed here that essentially the hack has occurred via a Medicare employee's details. And then what they've happened here is essentially that employee had access to the company's data repositories. Now, again, I've read sort of wider on this and I can't find the exact answer, probably because it hasn't been published, on whether that user should or shouldn't have had access to company data repositories. But on the longer video that I will do, it's something interesting to note that inside these companies, the zero trust policy, which is where you're meant to have the minimum amount of access that you're allowed, doesn't seem to be holding true here. It does seem that in some accounts, this employee probably shouldn't have access to this data and therefore could have potentially saved this situation, but I digress. In the next part of this sort of thing, which is something that's super important, it's unclear whether the employees would have needed multi-factor authentication to access this data, and if so, whether this was also compromised. And this final point is something that I wanted sort of to talk on. So in a sort of a hack scenario, there's never sort of one thing that goes wrong. It's always a combination of things. Now, what this is mentioning here is that, let's just say the hackers did compromise Medicare employees' numbers, username, password, and was able to log in. That username should have had some sort of MFA on it. Now, if there was MFA on that user, that would have also stopped this hack. So essentially what I think has happened here is one, some sort of phishing scam has occurred and they've secured the employee's details. Two, not mentioned in this article, but I believe this employee also left Medibank, and therefore once they left Medibank, they should have been terminated, all their accounts, which wasn't done. Three, according to other accounts and other articles, obviously not in this articles, there was also a time period between once the hacker actually had the credentials and when then on-sold them to another hacker, and there should have been some sort of password reset ongoing. They should reset that password in that period. And then four, access privileges. Should that have had enough access to those clients' data? Yes or no? It's difficult to say. And then five, was MFA turned on? Now, in this situation, if any one of these five things was followed, the attack wouldn't have occurred. One, if the credentials weren't pulled into a phishing attack, they would have no credentials to start with. Two, once the credentials were taken and the employee left the business, they should have been terminated. If their account was terminated, then the hacker couldn't have got into Medibank systems. Three, the password should have been reset. I understand that there was a lag of between 3 and 6 months between when this hack actually occurred, when they got the user's passwords, and when the actual hack happened. So it should have been reset. Fourth, should that user have had access? Look, this one's a hard one to know. I can't understand. I'm going to put a squiggly line through this one because whether this user should or shouldn't have had access to production data is difficult to say. But that's something to keep in mind that also could have stopped this. And fifth and finally, MFA. If that user had MFA on their account, then they wouldn't have allowed access to the thing. When the hacker tried to log in via their username and password, it would have prompted on their device. Obviously, they wouldn't have accepted it and the hacker wouldn't have got in. So here is essentially a failure of system across multiple processes that could have stopped this. There has not been anything released to date that has sort of confirmed this in order, but this is what I understand from piecing things together. And I think something that's important to take away for your business is that it's key to try and be security conscious at all times. And it's very key to try and run as many processes as possible. The reason that security has so many processes is they're fail safes. So if you do fall to a phishing scam, you've got MFA, it's okay. Or let's just say you do follow good password hygiene and you expire the passwords, then if something is compromised, it gets reset. Security is becoming more and more pressing, and I'm actually going to talk about in some other videos around various compliance frameworks you can go into and how they cover all of this. But the needless thing to say, the Medibank hack shouldn't have happened. Multiple frameworks and best practices would have avoided this, but for some reason, Medibank, even the size they are, didn't follow it. And I think it's a really good lesson for all businesses to take on board.